Hello and welcome to another episode of the Enthusiastic Life Podcast. Depending on where you are, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, I don't know, but just so happy that you're here to join us. My guest this week is my friend Kerry Duggan. Kerry has been a friend of mine since the early 2000s. She has a fascinating background. She is the owner of Energy Security Partners here in Detroit, formerly SustainabiliD. She's got a fascinating background of time in playing competitive basketball at a high level, to service in Washington D.C, to coming back to Detroit, starting her business, and her passion for the planet, for Detroit, for the state of Michigan. And she's also writing a book, which I'm pretty excited to hear about. But she is also one of the greatest connectors on planet Earth. And I think you'll really enjoy this conversation. So thank you so much for joining us, and please enjoy my conversation with Kerry Duggan. Kerry Duggan, welcome to the Enthusiastic Life Podcast.
Thank you for having me, Brendan.
It is a pleasure. So do you mind introducing yourself to our listeners and viewers?
Of course. And thank you for having me on. So Kerry Duggan. I'm Duggan, not Duggan. I have to clarify that at least once a week for the last 15 years.
For our non-Detroit area listeners, why would that be?
Well, Mayor Duggan is Duggan and I'm Duggan.
Same spelling, different pronunciation.
Exactly. I think my sister discovered we're perhaps fourth cousins from our ancient homeland.
Sure.
Anyway, I'm a proud Detroiter, as you know. I moved back here going on 9 years ago. After a decade in Washington, I started my own company before I left Washington called Energy Security Partners. And I also serve on some corporate boards and a couple of political appointments over the years. Proud mama, and do a couple other things. But most importantly, I live in Detroit, and I'm about Michigan out loud and on purpose wherever I go.
Love it. Mm-hmm. Love it. And you have a competitive streak.
What?
And you started in athletics at a young age and played basketball at a high level. Mm-hmm. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, that was what I call my first career.
Okay.
My folks replaced our sandbox in the backyard with a basketball court. And I was traumatized because I loved my sandbox. But as soon as they discovered I could make a three-pointer, that chapter of my life was pretty much written. I sort of always knew I would go on and play D1 sports. So played AAU and state champion in AAU, I think 7 times. Won the state championship my senior year at Detroit Country Day. Went on to play at St. John's University in New York. Was painted on a mural with Lou Carnesecca and Chris Mullen and Felipe Lopez, which is pretty funny. Got to go to Europe on a Nike tour. And then I came back and I ended up transferring to University of Vermont and played there. Took a 25-year hiatus and then agreed to join the Detroit Athletic Club's team. So I just went to my first national tournament in so many years. And I came back almost completely in one piece.
And how was that experience?
It was phenomenal. I would recommend any woman that thinks that part of their career is over, get back on the horse, because I felt like I was 20 again with the team, and I was 10 years older than any other woman in that tournament, so they took care of me. It was a blast.
Nice. Mm-hmm. And tell me about your time in D.C.
Well, I was there for about a decade in total. I started out, my early career, I was working at the intersection of sort of energy, environment, and politics, so at the national level and at the state level here in Michigan. But I was in D.C., really up close and personal, finding out how D.C. actually works at a relatively young age after graduate school. And with that work, I got to interview presidential candidates. I got to know many, many members of Congress. I had a great time. And then after that, when President Obama was elected, one of his appointees called and said, I need you to come to the Department of Energy and fix some things or some systems that needed improvement. So I went in before it was in fashion to call someone a fixer. I was sent in to fix some of the legislative bureaucracy, for lack of a better word. But
there's probably other words.
There's probably other
get us
words,
an explicit tag on this podcast.
I'm going to skip that part. But what's really neat, Brendan, is that I was there at Department of Energy probably like a month when a memo came in from the White House. President Obama was sending a team to Detroit, and that memo landed on my desk. So I was sent to the Detroit task force as the DOE, Department of Energy representative. And so I ended up doing that work for 6.5 years while having a day job.
Wow.
So I was literally dropped off here in Detroit by Secretary Moniz. I was embedded in City Hall here with Uncle Mike for 14 months. My main project was working on the streetlight conversion and other clean energy projects. So it's really neat to be back here after that decade. I guess I did one other thing when I was in Washington. I ended up working at the White House. So I think then Vice President Biden, he loves Detroit. If you know him, you know that about him. And so he I think, liked my work on the ground here, wanted someone who could do more than just write policy memos, someone who actually understood the ground game. So I became his climate advisor when he was vice president while I was still working on the Detroit task force. So it was a great time.
So that might be something that people wouldn't know. What gave Vice President Biden love for Detroit, being from, Pennsylvania and Delaware?
I think he felt a kinship with the people of Detroit. His own personal story and growing up in Wilmington and understanding the proximity of, he started in local politics. He was county council. So I think he really felt the sense of community here and how strong it was. And you and I have both witnessed that over the years. Detroit is a really special place, and he gets it. So did President Obama. I mean, there was nothing like it. That task force, Gene Sperling called us all in to the White House and said, we're going to do all we can, both real and symbolic. And I learned a lot, and I have a lot to share about that time, about how to do place-based work. And I was really proud to say I didn't go back to Washington after. Frankly, I didn't want to whipsaw my kids, but I did join the Secretary of Energy's advisory board under the Biden-Harris administration, under Secretary Granholm. And a lot of the work that I had done in that previous administration was held up as the model for how to do place-based work. So wow. I've had a great run, and I'm super happy to be able to contribute in the public sector as well still.
So I skipped over a question that I ask all my guests. And speaking of DC, made me think of it. Yeah. How did we meet? How did we become friends? What's our origin story? Do you remember? Because I have a memory, but I don't know if...
I'm scared now. I think I remember that you were working at Northwestern Mutual.
I was.
And I think we met because my older brother, Brian Duggan, was also working there. But that's as much as I can remember, but it was in Washington, but I feel like I knew you before that.
No, it was in DC.
Okay.
And then that was where it was during that time, but it was through my dad, Clune Walsh. Mm-hmm. Did you work at a law firm here at one point?
I did.
You worked at Butzel, right?
I didn't work at Butzel. I worked for a Honigman attorney.
That was it.
Did a spin out, yeah.
So I think you met him through that, and you were in DC. And I remember he was like, there's someone in DC from Detroit that you should know. And that's at least, memory's special. A funny thing.
That is special.
Yeah. But yeah.
So yeah, I always joke around because we have a lot of mutual friends in town. And they're like, oh, do you know Brendan? I'm like, I've known Brendan longer than you have. So take that.
So that had to have been post probably somewhere between 2007 and 2010. Mm-hmm. Is my guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Funny. So tell me about energy security partners. How do you go from, very different working in the public sector to the private sector. Mm-hmm. How do you take what you learned from your time in the public sector and create energy security partners and tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. Well, like many things, all roads lead back to Detroit. So I was being recruited while I was still working at the White House for a variety of very interesting, fancy jobs. Big salaries. I would have been on CNN every night, but I knew in my heart that they weren't the right fit. I have a pretty clear mission in life. So I was at lunch with a recruiter who is Michael Heider, Pam Lewis's brother, who I met during Detroit homecoming. So he had taken me out to lunch. They were recruiting me for a job. He was at Korn Ferry at the time. And halfway through the lunch, he said, Kerry, hang your own shingle. You know everybody. The work will come to you. And that seemed very high risk as somebody who was the breadwinner and all that kind of stuff. But I sent him a note about once a year for the last 9 years saying, thank you, you were right. I've never spent $1 on marketing in 9 years. Everything has been word of mouth, people who know me, refer me, et cetera. So the company is inherently, pulls out of two of the features of my federal service. So on one hand, deploying clean energy tech, LED streetlights here in Detroit, in a highly distressed environment, ahead of schedule and under budget. Part of my story. So deploying and scaling clean tech solutions that are going to help mitigate things like climate change and carbon emissions. That's one feature of the company. The other thing I did was a very senior advisory work on the state of technology, policy, the politics around it, and how to talk about it. So I advise CEOs and C-suites on the technology, policy that they need or need to work with, the politics of it all, which I understand, as you know, and then, how to communicate about it, because this is a different environment in the U.S. I will tell you, it's not a different environment around the world. So I do an awful lot of global strategic advisory, but functionally we work with 3 sets of clients, like your household name, global multinational corporation or think tank or foundation. Then I do an awful lot of public speaking. I was very proud to be asked to be on the State Department Speakers Bureau. And then the third piece are this portfolio I have of clean energy technology companies that I'm helping scale. 2 of them are, well, there's more than 2, but 2 of our favorites. I love all my states and companies equally, but 2 of our favorites are Luxwell, which is expanding in Michigan, and Arnex Energy, which broke the world record on miles traveled on a single EV charge.
And what was that?
782 miles in the winter in Michigan.
Wow.
Yeah, it made me cry when I saw the video. It was pretty impressive. The 2 Chaser ICE vehicles had to stop twice for gas, and they kept going. It was awesome. Really cool story. So, part of my jam with my company is really grounded in Detroit, headquartered in Detroit, very supportive of the state and Michigan. And it's not just because I'm from here. I'm a climate-educated person. If you're monitoring climate impacts, Michigan looks pretty good, relatively good compared to other places. So I am trying to encourage folks that are looking to stand up Factory 1 or whatever to think about Michigan as their headquarters, because they're not going to get a hurricane and wildfires like they had in LA. Flooding, of course, we still have to work against and solve for, but we're relatively good position. So it's fun to run a global company from here. It's fun to try and decarbonize the world from here. We have done big things, and part of the reason I return home is I want to take bigger swings at these global challenges.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So there's a part of the title of your company's name. Mm-hmm. So energy, right, is one thing, but tell me about how that fits into security.
Yeah. Well, back when I worked at the White House, the Pentagon put out a report saying that climate change will exacerbate existing threats globally. Read the news. People are going to move to where they have water and resources and can survive. So it's going to impact things like you're starting to hear a bit about climate migration and so on. A lot of the concerns out there are over scarcity. There's also the concern about critical materials that I still don't think the public fully appreciates the posture we're in with respect to China. So one of the things I did over the last year is I renamed my company. It used to be called SustainabiliD, which was fun for a while, but needed to onboard a partner that really understood the national security imperative that comes with energy. So Todd Sanders I've just brought on as my managing director for operations. He helps basically our internal operations, but he manages the consulting side of the practice. So I can come here and spend time with you and kind of be up and out and use my creative brain, and I also do some corporate board work, so that's been a good fit. And he does things like red teaming, which is something they learned in the military. He was 20-year Marine, very senior, and I'm very lucky to have him. And he also lives in Michigan. He lives up in Traverse City.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So you touched on something that I'm particularly impressed about with your resume is you're involved in a lot of things. I mean, you run a business, you play basketball, you have a family, and you're on a lot of boards. How do you manage all of that? And tell me about some of the board work that you're particularly excited about.
Sure. Well, first of all, I'll tell you, I do get 8 hours of sleep. I have a very good team. It's high on the trust factor, which I think is sort of everything, right? The board work I am very proud of. So I'm on 3 corporate boards, which at age 46, that's pretty good, and also that I'm a woman. I think the last time I read it was globally only 10% of corporate boards are made up of women, so that's not good. We need improvement in that area. But the board work I do takes me back to my origin story, sort of on the environmental side. One of them is traded on the NASDAQ. It deals with nuclear waste and PFAS. So, tough stuff, heady stuff. And then another one that's out of the UK, but I'm moving them here to Michigan. see a theme, deals with battery waste. So we can shred it's called Energia. We can shred a battery from any type of battery down to 98% of its original critical material in a very low, no emission process. So very, very cool stuff. To my earlier point on national security.
And so when you do that, what can you do with those materials?
We put them back into the cycle.
No kidding.
Yeah, it's really exciting.
Yeah.
And one of the things I've been doing in the last many years, one of our clients is Argonne National Laboratory. And so we partnered with them to do a scan of the Midwest to look at gaps and opportunities in the energy storage space, which is batteries. And Michigan wins that race. So I'm proud to be bringing a company here to continue to build out our ecosystem. And the third one that I'm working with on the corporate board side, I'm the only American member of the board and the only woman of Blue Green Water Tech. It's an Israeli company, also moving to the States. I'm helping them scale up. It kills harmful algal blooms, which we know all about here in the Great Lakes state.
We do.
So I'm very excited about that company. It's a sort of nature-based solution and with co-benefits of carbon sequestration. So when they sink the HABs, toxic algal blooms, it can create permanent carbon sequestration, which also and methane, which is we're just studying that right now.
Wow.
So all that work really is fulfilling to me, and it takes me back to my roots, which I think is really, really cool and something I'm exploring in my book is where I started and how I ended up back working on some of the things I really care about while I had this whole other interesting career in the middle.
So tell me about this book that you're working on.
Yeah, you hold me accountable, but I think I'm going to be done next week with it. But it's my story, a memoir, if you will, but really it's a leadership playbook disguised as a memoir. So I'm really focused on the Forrest Gumpian kind of life I've had and the lessons I've learned and the things I find myself repeating, especially to women of color, to try and get them out of their own way and up the ladder, if you will. But I've named it, tongue-in-cheek, Humble Midwestern Girl, because the first day I went to New York City when I was being recruited for basketball at St. John's, Joe Mulaney, the coach, he introduced me to everyone as she's just a humble Midwestern girl. And I just laughed because I was, on my high horse at 16. I graduated when I was 17. So I was young and, pretty cocky back then. So I chuckled to myself, but it's true. I'm very proud of where I'm from and how it's shaped my personality and, of course, my family. But I'm breaking the book into 4 sections. Humility, which we're known for here in the Midwest, gumption, how I got where I got, competition, you're right, I'm a little competitive, and service, because I'm very proud of my time in service, and I continue to do public service, so I wish everyone would.
Yeah. And gumption's just a great word.
It is. We need more of that in Michigan.
Yeah. So something you mentioned that I wanted to touch on is you have a particular skill. You might be the greatest living connector I have ever met in my life. There has not been a time where we've sat down and talked, whether in person, on the phone, coffee, lunch, where you're just talking about people, right? And not in a name dropping, this is who I know, but just in a natural kind of assumption of, oh, you know who this person is, or an offering to like, this is someone that you should know. Tell me about the skill of connecting. How is that learned? Is it inherent? Is it how you've always been? How have you become the connector that you are today?
First of all, thank you. That's very kind. One of the deans in my grad school program told me, he's like, you're a connector and a change agent. I really like that. I use that as a moniker for a little while in my company. For me, it's about impact, solutions, and you know what my focus is on. I'm trying to keep the planet healthy and livable for our kids. So I'm with intention in my business about the connections I'm making. I think I also just see things differently. I think differently, and I'm really grateful that I grew up in an era before cell phones and digital everything, because I was really forced to think critically as a kid. And I spend a lot of time quietly thinking about, this is why I'm grateful to have a partner that helps me now, because I do have time freed up to just think about the connections that need to happen to solve the problems. I mean, I think about it this way. Organizations are just people. Culture comes from the people you're working at. Symbols matter, artifacts matter, your logo matters, but it's really the people. And I try to identify the super nodes like me and put us to work for good. And I, of course, as you know, like helping my friends get to their next space, wherever they're supposed to occupy. And it brings me joy. It really does. And I was laughing, actually, on the way over here because I got asked that question when I was winding down my time in service. I was with Steve Crowley, who's now the head of policy at Ford Motor. He was the chief general counsel at the U.S. Department of Energy when I was there.
Okay.
So really smart guy. And we're walking through Eastern Market in town. I forget why we're here. And he said, "What are you going to do?" And I was like, "I just want to find a way to do connecting and having impact." And that's what I do in my company every day. I have a great team behind me, which allows me to do all these things that I do. And one of the things that's a pretty regular part of our practice is building bridges, making connections, emails. And I don't always ask people's permission. I'm just like, I know this, you two need to talk, you need to work together. But we do that quite a bit, and that's a lot of how my business runs, to be honest with you. Yeah.
Yeah. And because having experienced this in my life, I know exactly what you're talking about, where when you can connect people and it's the right connection, it's just the best.
Yeah, it's magic.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, it's magic. So there's something that you mentioned earlier that I want to touch back on. I don't even know if you said it, but you mentioned in passing your mission in life. Tell me more about that. What?
Well, this goes back to my basketball story. So I ended up hanging up my shoes, and I'll tell you, when you go to play D1 college basketball, you're wearing whatever logo of your sponsor. So in my case, it was Nike was the sponsor for St. John's. And at the same time, I was studying the environmental studies and science. And in that, I was also learning about things like sweatshops. And so I was discovering who was making the shoes that I was wearing so I could go shoot an orange ball through a hoop at night. I found that very challenging to reconcile. I mean, I really struggled with that. And I transferred to Vermont because I really wanted to focus more on my studies. It's sort of the green promised land, if you will, a really strong environmental program. And it became no different. I was still playing basketball and having a hard time with it. So I ended up leaving basketball, and literally the next day I was asked to teach in the environmental program by my advisor. And I thank the stars and the goddesses for that, because I really needed it. I had a complete identity of basketball for all of my life. Left it, was asked to get into what I knew was my path, and that door flew open. So it was like, I did a post the other day about fear. That was very scary for a young person. I don't know how old I was, like 18, 19, 20, whatever. But no looking back. And being able to teach at UVM, when I came to grad school at Michigan, I was able to teach at Michigan, which when you're a GSI, they pay for your tuition. So it's so funny how things work out.
Yeah.
It'll be in the book.
It's an excellent teaser. So with all of the things that you have going on in your world right now, where are you finding the most joy?
Well, we talked about connecting for impact, but a lot of that right now is through my partnership with a company called Zero Circle. It's a startup founded by the former chief product officer of Dun & Bradstreet, who saw this gap in middle market, small and medium-sized companies are being crushed in terms of what their obligations are to their OEMs or whoever that have to do climate reporting in every other country.
Sure.
And they don't have the technical chops. They don't necessarily have my education to do their reporting. They don't know where to find the money to do the work, the things they need to do to get the carbon out of their supply chains. And so we partnered with the likes of Schneider Electric, huge company, the top sustainable company in the world, so that they can use our platform, which is an AI platform. So AI plus finance plus reporting. Nobody does that. And we go inside and work with Schneider to help their suppliers. So we're helping, the bigger entities help get the carbon out of their supply chains. Really fun. We actually have a pilot underway with DT Energy right now. All things back to Detroit, Brendan.
Yeah. So tell me, I have to ask. So we go from joy, but this is a little bit heavier of a question, but it weighs on me. Working in energy, we're concerned about climate. How do you manage that in a world full of misinformation and disinformation?
I don't give my energy to any of that nonsense. I don't have time for it. Nobody's going to tell me after all the things I've done and witnessed and what we're living through right now, what I already know is true, that we have a problem. It is a big problem. So I spend all of my energy on trying to solve it and using the tools in my toolkit to do so. So I don't, life is short. I'm going to use the time I have to do as much as I can, and I'm not going to spend a minute being sad. So
And then what's it like to be around so many people that are working on solutions for such a big problem?
Amazing. So I do go to a lot of conferences, you might imagine. I was just in Chicago with the Aspen Institute. We've done a lot of work with them in the past. And I get to see my old boss, Secretary Moniz, and catch up with him, and the Chief Sustainability Officer of Microsoft. They're doing big things. Friends and former coworkers with all these people that are just out there doing great things. So it helps, again, like as a connector and change agent, I'm looking at these guys, I'm looking at the projects and trying to figure out where I can make the matches. So on Zero Circle specifically, there's a lot of deal flow and projects that are coming in through them all over the world. I mean, some amazing opportunities for big swings. And so I'm just all day long using my network to try and impact things,
And tell me about your passion for Detroit and the state of Michigan, because we talk a lot about Detroit on this podcast because I've interviewed a lot of people from Detroit. But tell me about your passion, not only for the city of Detroit, but for the state of Michigan as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, you were both Irish, so there's a saying, if you're lucky enough to be Irish, you're lucky enough or whatever. I feel that way about being from Michigan. I mean, we're surrounded by 21% of the world's fresh surface water. That's thing one. I grew up on the Great Lakes. I spend as much time on or near the water as I can. Detroit specifically, like my great-grandfather came here from Ireland with nothing and did very well for himself. And so part of me feels very generationally responsible to give back to this place that's given my family so much. I have a wonderful, huge, big, fat Irish family here. So I feel very responsible to take care of this place I'm from. With respect to Michigan, I feel very, very blessed because I'm able to split my time between Detroit. I have an industrial loft on the river. I have a farm in Traverse City where I have a view of the West Bay and an apple orchard and a cherry orchard and a vineyard orchard view. And then I have a cabin in the Upper Peninsula, which is heaven on earth. I sleep with the window open and just listen to critters all night. I have a great life in Michigan, and I'm trying to, use my profile to encourage people to come home. We've been accused of having the brain drain, and so I've done things like assemble everybody I can find that's chosen to return home or chosen to come here and kind of help them build community, which is challenging if you're just returning or you don't know the place at all. But Detroit in particular is a very welcoming place. I'm on the river almost every day in good weather. I'm at the DAC otherwise. And the one thing I notice when I'm walking is that everybody nods their head at you.
And it's a very specific Michigan and Detroit thing.
It is. I've traveled.
We know that nod.
Yes, yeah. But I travel the world, and I remember walking in London, and I'm like, God, everyone here stinks. Like nobody nods, and of course you already know about New York. So it is a special place, and historically, so significant with respect to our democracy and so on. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your continued passion around the work that you do around our city, around our state. If people wanted to find energy security partners or any of the boards or companies that you work with, where would they find them? EnergySecurityPartners.com, so a pretty straightforward URL. And I also have my own public speaking website, I think it's KerryDuggan.com. LinkedIn, I'm pretty active and visible. Same with Instagram. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Kerry, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much to Kerry Duggan for joining us. Thank you so much for listening. Again, we're so grateful for any and all of you listeners or watchers who are enjoying the Enthusiastic Life podcast. Hope you enjoyed that conversation. Kerry's just she's one of a kind, and I hope you really enjoyed where we went with that talk. If you have enjoyed this and you want to learn more, please consider giving us a follow on Instagram, Facebook under the Enthusiastic Life Podcast. Follow us, subscribe to our video channel on YouTube. And if you've enjoyed it, please give us a share or let us pass this on to a friend. Ratings, comments on Spotify or YouTube or Apple Podcasts all go a long way to more people learning about us. So thank you again for listening. Thank you for sharing, and have a great day.